Okay. Wonderful.
I love it.
Oh, Liz, thank you so much for coming and being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'll do the little awkward bit, the very academic bit. We'll do the bio so everyone knows who you are.
Okay.
Reading off my phone. So,
pro.
Elizabeth Gaubert is coach, a writer and a storyteller, with background in theatre and arts, and also a certified coach from the University of Cambridge. We did the same training course, which is how we met. Her experience as a writer ignited her passion for coaching and creating safe spaces for others on their journey towards insight, clarity, and direction, which is a beautiful bio line. She describes her coaching style as coaching that leads with compassion, curiosity, and nurturing creativity. Gorgeous.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard anyone read that out to me. Thank you for that intro. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. We've been working together as well, and on a cohort, as you said, when we were studying, now working together professionally, and we love our conversations, our constant conversations in sessions and outside of sessions. So this is the first for us to kind of be sharing these conversations in this space with others. So very excited, and I really thank you again for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled. Thank you very much for sharing your lunchtime with us. It is quite self-indulgent on my part, as you say, because I enjoy our conversations so much. I wanted to share them with this beautiful group of women that we have in the community now. So let's kick off then. Everyone on this call is either an academic or a recovering academic, working towards recognition in the academy through a PhD. And I am obviously in the recovering academic bracket. So to kick us off, the conversations that you and I have had about academic writing, academic process, this sort of container for research and writing and creativity that the university creates, what would be your initial observations about that?
I think some of the strongest stuff that comes to mind, and obviously coming from a space of kind of with creativity in mind, that academic work is creative work, and the academic culture doesn't necessarily foster that creativity as well as it could. And I think it's the fostering creativity that could be really helpful and beneficial for those spaces. And also the bivocational element is something I definitely think would be interesting for us to talk about today, because I think that's really challenging. And while I'd say there's lots of things that mirror in our other spaces, but in this space in particular, it's quite unique, and it's quite these two hats that you have to kind of wear, and awareness around that for the individual of how they transition from those spaces is something that I wasn't expecting to kind of come and be part of our conversations that has. And awareness and self-reflection as a whole being much stronger, should be much stronger in that culture for the kind of work that you're doing. And we talked a lot about the critical and analytical piece that's so important, and kind of mindset, and having awareness around that and having a healthy relationship with that. And I think what I mean by that is it's such a strong muscle that you guys have to develop, which can actually come, I think, without a healthy relationship with it or awareness around it, it can be overstimulated and overused on work and yourself. But it's a really important piece. It's a really important skill to harness. But harnessing it without a level of making actually like in a healthy way is something I think that's a unique vulnerability to that space and people in that space. And so I think that's been a big thing. And criticism and praise comes up a lot around receiving and being critical and analytical in any coaching work that I do, and I would say you do, but definitely in this space, definitely for those clients coming from that academic world, recovering or in, I would say.
Wow, so much there, Liz.
Yeah, they're the big, sorry, that is a lot.
So I've got the academic work is creative work, which
Yes.
hopefully everyone on this call knows I fully agree with and resonate with. And similarly, that academia doesn't really foster that creativity. But I love that you picked up on the bivocational element. It's funny, I was literally thinking about this before coming into this session, about the way in which writers, filmmakers, artists, musicians might describe themselves as one of those professions and then say, and I also do X, I do copy editing to pay the bills or something. And there's a very clear awareness of this bivocational element of two jobs and the challenge of moving between those. Or it might be, I know Sarah Ray Warner from the Right Now podcast, she used to work in product design. And so she was a full-time product designer, but then she wrote in the evening. So she would say, I'm a product designer, but I also write. And there's just that sense of moving between roles. But academia is a single container that effectively holds these two roles together. You're a researcher, you're a writer, you're a creative person, you're also a full-time educator and managerial, administrative person. And you got to do it all in this one 40-hour container. Without that recognition of shifting between mindsets, literally neurological processes, there is then no space for that slowness, that nurturing that you're talking about, that healthy harnessing of critical thinking. Would you say there's a difference between being a writer and being an academic writer?
No. I mean, I think there are differences because there's differences for the individual, and there's differences, as we've kind of highlighted, in the culture you might be in and some of the challenges you might have. But you are writing, you are generating ideas, you are trying, you're being curious, you're exploring, you're developing, this is all my kind of nurturing, gardening those ideas, but you're then producing something that you're going to share as well. And I think there are differences in how that writing journey may look and the writing process may look, and also the amount, and you will help me here because obviously I don't have as strong understanding as how much your work is intercepted and reviewed along the way, but there is definitely more of that in that academic piece than, say, a lot of creators will get. And so they have their pros and cons in different ways, and they are the same with their own unique differences, but fundamentally they're the process of creating and writing and producing a body of work, and you're going to come up against very similar themes. And there's a lot, and I'd say there's a lot of that language around there supporting writers that are, say, writing under this umbrella that is seen as a creative body of work. There's different language used around it, there's different support, it has a different culture, some in which, as I say, can have its more cons than what's in the academic space, but also then I'd say as well the other way around. So it's understanding those similarities and bringing awareness about what actually is missing from that space. And I just want to say that, so for me, I would say people are creative. The spaces like universities or an organisation or our homes, they aren't creative. They are just spaces that either inhibit or foster our creativity. And so we may not always be in a space which we can control how much that is inhibited or fostered. So that awareness, and I'd say what I would want to take is some pieces that say in under an umbrella of like an artist writing creative space could be brought in, could be extremely powerful and useful, and help to foster and I suppose coming into a coaching space is part of you doing that. It's you being a bit more curious about what you need and what could actually, like, what is the work that you're doing, connecting with it in a way that we've talked a lot about as well, that's authentic, that is actually giving you a connection to the piece of work. So as you continue, you're anchored somewhere and you don't get lost within the difficult and challenging space that it is when you're producing something. But yeah, I think it's finding out, there's not always, some things are going to relate and transfer and some things aren't, but it's finding out what the individual needs that's going to foster that creativity that helps the work expand and grow. It's that flow that we've talked about before.
And our favorite word, being curious.
Yeah, being curious. Yeah.
Can I raise a tension in that, because it's beautiful and I love this idea of what is missing and what could we foster in this space to bring in some of this curiosity and this nurturing. But something I'm quite interested in at the moment is the question of authorship in academia. And with this comes a whole raft of tensions and restraints around some of these questions that you're raising here. What do I need? What is the work I'm doing? What is an authentic connection with it? All of which are questions which tend towards the best creative work. But in academia, the creative work, you're laughing, you're anticipating my question.
No. I just, this idea of the best creative, but yes, well, please.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Like it takes you this place of like, it's not shallow, right?
Yeah.
But in academia, this is tied to getting a permanent role, publishing in certain ways in certain journals within a certain time frame to go from being precarious to being permanent, and then to no longer be on probation, and then to go to a senior lecturer, and then to get research leave, or then to get a research grant. And the outputs are tied in very material, structured ways that relate to the use of time and the value placed on certain themes and outputs over others. We have a number of filmmakers in the room today whose work would not be recognised in the same way as a published article in an academic journal. Different types of writing, reflexive. We've got some great, incredible, creative, reflexive writers in the room who we've had conversations about, should this work go forward and how will it be received? I think that there's something in this idea of authorship as well, because who owns the product at the end? If you're a creative writer whose work is going to a commercial publisher, your name is on the book jacket and you have that copyright element, and you get your tiny percentage of sales, and you might even get, paid a slight advance, who knows. In academia, it's the university and the ref that owns the copyright over your work. So Janet Stager said this interesting comment about filmmakers, actually, which she said authorship matters, especially for anyone in a non-dominant position. And she was talking about female and queer filmmakers. But I just wonder what these kinds of constraints around actually owning and authoring the final product and all the strictures around what counts in academia does to some of these questions and that fostering of creativity.
That's really interesting. I think exploring that and I suppose with that space and understanding of the body of work you're going to be creating in that environment at that time, and asking those questions of, I suppose really knowing what you believe is possible with that work, what with kind of how you're explaining there's going to be some parts which you can't change or control, or maybe you want to be a change agent and you want to be part of changing and mixing that up, and that's great, but not everyone has to take that on, and that's not the thing to say that you should, but understanding where you feel about that, how you feel about it, where you fit comfortably, and then if you're going to be producing that work with awareness of those questions and how you, I suppose how it might make you feel, and then in the moment of kind of producing that work and understanding what you're producing it for, where it's taking to you next. Because if you have an understanding in which it maybe is a stepping stone into something where you know you want to get to, that can be obviously really helpful, and it can give you a different look on the work that you're doing. But it would be for the individual to kind of explore those questions, I think, and then see, okay, right now, maybe what your overall future like ideal is and values around the work that you're doing, and why you've kind of stepped into this space, and maybe what this step and this project you're working on right now serves that. And then maybe what you might even have to think about your values with your work right now, or the things you want to lead with might be different for this space, and finding the right ones that are comfortable for you. I think it again encourages to be a bit more flexible, because we have ideals, and we have, if there's much reflection and self-awareness that we can do, we're always going to actually have to mix things up a bit and go with the flow. And the more engaged we are and the more comfortable we get with that is also really helpful. It's like comfortable with the uncertainty, which is really challenging for anyone. But yeah, so those are my kind of mind blasts on that.
You mentioned your favorite word, which is values.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we don't talk about a lot in academia. So can you tell me what you mean by values, or by writing values, or creative values?
Yeah, I think, you can, the more I've kind of actually engaged in values, mainly through my coaching practice, I've started to kind of understand them as in kind of 4 categories, with being like personal values, health values, career values, relationship values. And I think they're, for me, are actually 4 pockets to look at them, because when I first started looking at values for myself and even with clients, it was this kind of overall focus of core values, things that embody your beliefs and attitudes, that can help be your internal compass. And I love that idea of actually really connecting with genuinely how you feel about things, what you react to in a negative way, what you really are passionate about in a positive way, what drives you, what enrages you even. But and it's such a healthy thing to do, but the more I've looked into it, I have kind of categorized them, and I think it is really helpful to understand that there are different pockets in which to dive deep and have an awareness on those core, and they might overlap, but definitely with some of the work that we've been doing, having awareness around that personal values, and I'd say, the bigger bracket is work, career values, but could be just writing values. What is it that you really, like, your attitudes and your core beliefs about creating, producing a body of written work, your foundations, to help build your foundations and support you and influence you as you make decisions, and help determine your thoughts and feelings on things. But I think well, I cannot digress, but anchoring back to a really important point that I suppose I should have started with, is that until we sit with these, sometimes we can have values in our lives that we think we're really aware of, because they're probably the most spoken about and the most obvious, we're the most familiar with them, because they've just kind of common language that we've grown up with, be it culturally or through religion or just society, whatever they are that have come into your life. They may be the ones you understand the most, but they may not be your actual strongest value that you connect with. And so, and it's not a bad thing, and they can still hold a place, but they're just the ones you're most familiar with because they've been exposed to you the most. And actually, when you start to really connect with how you feel and respond to things, it's really powerful. And to do that with your work is exciting, because it also can lead you to follow things that you're interested in, follows things in a way that gets you into that pattern of working where you're working with where your brain naturally goes as well. And where, you know, and kind of optimizing your brain in that way. Oh, sorry if that's...
No, that's lovely. Thank you for a beautiful tie-in to my workshop later this month on working with your repertoire. But I have I mean, I think what you said there is so interesting. And I think there's something, and also how the values that sit at the surface can even hamper us at times. So I inadvertently revealed one of my values just there, and you started laughing at me because you saw me do it, about talking about, you know, work, the best work, and work with depth, which is a very evident value for me, but also has been a problem because it has hampered my writing rather than helped it. I'm not saying having a value for depth and quality is a bad thing, but it has led to a freeze, to a perfectionism that has blocked me, especially when mixed with that hypercriticality that you talked about at the beginning, this kind of unique vulnerability that academics have of being very critical, trained to be critical in a highly critical environment, and that can become quite difficult to deal with. So that surface value of depth led me to something that stopped me from being able to work. Whereas actually, when we looked at what are some of my deeper held, less surface values, discovering that actually I put a real value on commitment and on discipline, which is a word that I hate in the pejorative sense because I think about disciplining, but discipline in terms of actually showing up. And that has then propelled me into this writing everyday project that I'm doing on Substack, which completely gets me away from perfectionism, because it's a few paragraphs a day that has to go out every day, and I have no time to polish it. So mining into some of those deeper values can also, I think, help to move us away from some of the blocks maybe we've been sitting at the surface, like you talked about inherited family values or enculturated values from academia as well. Should we kind of wrap up this little bit of chat before we bring everyone else in and just talk about that healthy relationship with criticality? And you said this lovely phrase about academics being kind of overstimulated and overusing the training of criticality. What do you mean by that?
So do you know what? When this has come up before, I kind of, I don't know if this is helpful. The kind of image I use to describe it is if it's like a lot of tools or strategies, it's a muscle that you're building. And if we don't build that muscle, like thinking of it as a real muscle in the body, if we don't build it safely, so therefore we, you know, warm up before we use it, we don't go and start lifting, you know, the heaviest weights that we can, we don't build it slowly over time, we don't nurture, we don't give it the right like nutrients and food that it needs to grow properly, and potentially, and again, nothing against bodybuilders, completely respect their work, but thinking of it in the sense of going to a point where you are you're making the muscle as big as possible, not necessarily for the actual function. And actually, when you make that muscle, and I think about it physically, too big, you actually can, and for the body and for that space, there's this like stiffness that can happen, and lack of flexibility in how you can actually use that muscle. And it can end up being the biggest muscle you have in your body, but actually the weakest. It's not actually going to be able to help you in every scenario. And I kind of, when I think about building healthy relationships as well, okay, that's a side piece, criticism and praise, so I won't necessarily dive in there, but with this critical and analytical mind and way of being, that is really important for the work that you're doing. If you don't really hear that voice and hear and have that nurtured language that you've developed, that you can trust and you know is actually realistic thinking rather than over analytical and over critical, and even stepping into personal negative self-talks and inner critic thing, your own personal inner critics can kind of sneak in there, because I think, oh, it's safe because you think you're being, you know, this is your job to be critical and analytical. Oh my gosh, I can dive in, you're not even going to notice it. And so the more awareness you have of your own as well, to kind of separate the two, I think is really important. But I do see it like this muscle, and it's really important, like anything, you need to build it slowly over time and safely. And that comes with developing your own language, your own process of being critical and analytical, you know, sorry if I'm not phrasing this properly, but yeah, your own way that is healthy and works. That, again, towards growth. A big indicator is if what you're doing all the time ends with basically very black and white, restrictive, statement-led spaces where you are actually narrowing, not in a way of wow, getting deep into something, but narrowing yourself away and into a bit of a hole. That's a big indicator that that muscle is not working properly. You want it to be expansive. That's the whole thing, opening it up to other perspectives when you're kind of trying to be quite critical and analytical. But if you start to like shut down, I think that's a big indicator. Yeah.
Beautiful. I've summarized it on my pad. So warm up the muscle, build it slowly over time. I really like the warming up, by the way. Big advocate of stretching, as you know. I feel like warming up the muscle could be a good like little mindfulness breath work. Go on, jump in.
I was going to say, and rest it.
And rest it. There we go.
You have to rest it. You know, you're going to get
You're
going to do what's it called, DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. It's going to hurt if you don't rest it, stretch it out,
God, yes.
And give it some breathing space.
I love it. Write something else.
Yeah.
Write some fiction. Write some poetry.
Yeah.
Write a tune for your guitar. So warm up the muscle, build it slowly over time, nurture and support for healthy growth, use it appropriately, and rest it. So times where you just shouldn't be critical. Just go and play. Finger paint.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Be free.
Jump in the ball pit.
Freedom to fail and jump in the ball pit. Love that.
Beautiful. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you to anyone who's watched the recording. Hope you really enjoyed that little chat, and you can connect with Liz on LinkedIn. Where can you find you?
I've just kind of started changing my LinkedIn and putting that out there. So yes, you can. I'll put my email address though in the chat as well for later, so you can also just directly connect with me via email.
Anyone who wants to be connected with Liz, who's just watching the recording, if you can't find her on LinkedIn, get in contact and I will pass on the email.
Amazing.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Liz.
Thank you.
I will attempt to stop the recording.